The Sunshine Coast, about an hour north of Brisbane in southeast Queensland, with a resident population of 360,000 people, has a long list of idyllic places to live, work, stay and play. And right at the top of that list, nestled in the Blackall Range, is Palmwoods. This is a story about Palmwoods. Palmwoods then and now. Palmwoods is ideally positioned close to the sun, surf and the coast's white sandy beaches. And if you've had enough of the beaches, a short drive west brings you to the rich rural hinterland where there's always a breathtaking sunset. The Palmwoods region, including Hunchie, Landershute and Chevalum, provides daily opportunities for young and the not-so-young families to live and enjoy the good life, free from the elevated pace of coastal rush hours. Perfectly positioned, close to the M1 North and South rail links and both the Maroochy and Brisbane airports. Palmwoods is a shining light to any small community's development, largely driven by the foresight and hard work demonstrated by past and present residents. Let's look back through the years and trace the historical milestones for Palmwoods. European settlers first arrived in Palmwoods during the 1800s. Prior to settlement, First Nations people inhabited the area, and records suggest camps were situated near the Big Pineapple and the Chevalum area, along with numerous walking tracks through Palmwoods. Hand drawings, evolved from traditional owners' stories, detail the travel route from the Blackall Ranges to the coast. The extensive rainforest provide an abundance of food source both on land and in the waterways. Later on, these routes were used to carry timber to various locations. The region was subject to pastoral and other restrictions to safeguard the food source for the First Nations people. In 1889, these governor-imposed restrictions were lifted. The original name for the settlement was Palm Tree. Later in 1891, this was changed to Palmwoods. Land was cleared to make way for corn, potatoes and cattle grazing, with the population largely consisting of bullock drivers, farmers and timber cutters. The first school, providing education for 17 students, opened later that year. Early storekeepers and tradespeople provided a majority of the town's needs, as outings to other centres were not an everyday undertaking like they are today.
We used to do all our shopping in Palmwoods. The shops that I shopped in are still here. The one up down near the hotel, that used to be what they call Collins's store, and they had groceries and materials, dresses. That shop contained most things. On the corner was a cafe. Next to it was a butcher shop, which was Hobson's butcher shop, and they used to kill all their own beef. Opposite that used to be a bakery where they made bread. Marty Moore was the baker. So the shop across the road used to be a cafe, little cafe, and a baker shop. My grandfather used to have a bullock wagon, and I think he was 13 when he started working. So I guess it evolved from them then. It wasn't only my dad that owned the sawmill. He and his brother bought the sawmill between them. And unfortunately, his brother was killed in the sawmill. A blitz rolled on him. But the name of the sawmill was Young Brothers. And I really don't know how they used to cut cases for a place called Redlands. They were cut out of flooded gum and blackbud. Really don't know how they got the contract, but they used to cart down lots. That was what they were called, a case mill, and they cut cases. I used to have to go out into the bush with Stan, my husband, and pull him out of a bog in the dozer, and it was only the trees that kept us on the road. Most of the case timber, what you called case timber, came off farms, and used to pay the farms so much royalty on the tim, or the sawmill did, of course. And we actually cleared an area at Pomona when the electric line went through from Brisbane to Cairns, and there was lots and lots of blackbutt and flooded gum on that area. That's where I had nearly rolled a blitz onto myself. The road out of Palmwoods is the same road when I was a kid. That was the road my father used to drive us up there. We used to go down to Maroochydore. He actually played in a band, right? And we had to wait till he had to sleep. And he used to drive us down to Maroochydore to have a swim. Palmwood was a stop for every railway, for every train that went between Brisbane and Cairns. Every train stopped at Palmwoods, going north and going south. And they'd fill up with water from the lagoon. That lagoon has never, ever been dry because it was kept going by springs from up Nicklin Road all down through there, and it's never been dry.
The year was 1918, and a group of North Coast fruit growers banded together to form the Palmwoods Montville Buderim Amalgamated Fruit Growers Association, later shortened, I'm sure to everyone's relief, to the PMB. Meetings were held in the Palmwoods Hotel, with the main aim to secure markets in other major capital centres shipped in crates on the rail system. The first consignments left Palmwoods in 1919. The PMB grew quickly, with the new shed open in 1920, selling hardware and rural supplies to the local farmers and community. In following years, numerous changes happened to the administration, representation and local interests of growers. It has been often said that pineapples and citrus were the backbone of the Palmwoods farming scene. No matter which way you travelled in or around Palmwoods, you could see farm after farm of arguably some of the best produce grown in the coastal region.
I got started in 1951 when I left school. I went back onto the farm with my father, and we were farming pineapples and citrus. He had about 5 acres of pineapples and around about 1,000 citrus trees. I was full-time. In 1951, I just left school and went on the farm. I was president of the pineapple discussion group for a large number of years, and I was on the board of QFS Queensland Fruit Growers for 18 years, I think it was, until I retired from that. Farming, you're always dealing with weather, droughts and floods, and well, that's the two basic ones. Because I was 21 before we got electricity on the farm, and that was life-changing too, because well, I was batching. I was living on my own, so it meant that in the morning I didn't have to get up and light the wood stove and chop wood and make something for lunch. And then on the farm, we, of course, the grading machine for grading the citrus in the shed, it had to be driven by a motor. There was all things like that the electricity really changed. It was a good life. It was a good life. The early cannery, it made a big difference. And of course, at that time, we had the Second World War going too, and it was before my time. I was only 8 when the war finished, but I do remember the control of citrus, citrus and pineapples. We had to. There was a direction. COD stands for Committee of Direction, and the farmers were directed to send. It was something like, say, 1 case of fruit had to go to the war effort, and 2 cases you kept for yourself. They're hypothetical numbers because I don't remember the exact numbers. But that was when the cannery started. We had an outlet for our fruit. We paid so much a tonne to send our fruit to the factory and to market, and it was collected by the agents and also by Golden Circle. At the stage we had 7 farms on the go. But I had, we had our day labour type labour, and I had the same bloke for 27 years as the leading, I suppose you'd call him a leading hand. Most of our harvesting was done by contract, so much a bin on the citrus, and we had the same contractor there for about 30 years, 30 odd years, the same bloke. So it was never a problem for me, labour. I think I'm probably praising myself up a bit, but I think we looked after our labour fairly well. And because we had a fishing operation going at the same time, so we used to have blokes, if it was rough weather, we had them working on the farm, and labour was never an issue for us. Development played a big part on our side, and we contributed to it too, I've got to admit. We had 60 odd acres of pineapples and 60 or 70 acres of citrus on Winston Road. We finished up with 9,000 citrus trees and 60 acres of pineapple. We were planting 250,000 pineapples a year when I finished pineapples. The early cannery was where the Daniel Morecambe house is now. Cases were a real big thing. We used to have a lot of trouble getting cases at times. There would have been 7 or 8 case mills around. We were always struggling for money. As soon as we got a bit of money, I went and bought another property, so that didn't help the cash flow all the time. And we didn't really have much money until we started to sell up the properties.
Would you do it over again?
Yes. Yeah, I would. I'd do it differently.
Both Palmwoods and Buderim farmers in 1903 recognised the need to find additional routes to supply their produce. They approached the authorities to build a tramway to either the Woombye or Diddleybar terminuses, but these proposals were rejected. Further attempts in 1907, with the addition of the new Palmwoods route, met the same fate. It wasn't until 1912 the Palmwoods proposal was accepted by the Commissioner of Railways and the Chief Engineer. 2 years on, and with a marked increase in the budget, the Palmwoods to Buderim, or Buderim to Palmwoods tramway, depending on which town you live in, was officially opened on the 18th of June 1915. Opened up opportunities for residents at both ends of the line to travel backwards and forward to dances, sporting events, and functions at larger railhead towns, albeit in open wagons. The build wasn't without its dramas. The budget for the project increased from £21,000 to £36,000 due in part to resumptions, lack of labour through war duties, and materials being in short supply. Is north of the Mons station, and I'm standing on the tramway that was built in the 1900s, a real engineering feat of its time. To the northeast is Buderim, about 1.5 km, 2 km, and to the west is Palmwoods. And you can imagine as I stand here, and it's not lost on me, the amount of toil and heartache that would have gone into making this tramway. They didn't have our modern technologies. They didn't have dozers. They had picks and shovels. This really is a fantastic engineering achievement. Now we're standing on the tramway track, and it's a long time since it's been built. We're actually on one of the cuttings. Just tell us about the cutting and how it was formed.
Well, the cuttings were all formed by a process of what's called cut and fill. When there was a hill to cut through, to make a cutting through it, they would take the spoil, the soil and the stone from that cutting and start to build the actual embankment up here. Now remember, this was all done with horses and scoops, picks and shovels and blasting powder.
Well, it was a time, wasn't it, when technology, we have it now, but they didn't have it then. So really, and a lot of the produce that was brought on the tramway came up here via the carriages, but in the early times it was brought down by wagons. And they used to cut up the roads, didn't they?
Yep, and mainly the wagons were taking stuff down to the rivers, and it was mainly Pettigrew's steamers out of Brisbane that were taking the timber, the red cedar, away and bringing supplies up that way. But you imagine what Buderim Hills are like, with bullocks snigging timber on wagons and then raining on top of that. Would have been hopeless.
Yes.
So you can see why they wanted an alternative transport route.
Exactly. And not only was it bringing produce, but the people themselves would come to Palmwoods or to Buderim and ride in open wagons. That must have been a bit of a thrill for them.
Oh yes, they'd come up on the main line from Brisbane up to Palmwoods, and then they'd get onto the tram, and there was only one passenger wagon. It'd be taken fairly quickly, and then the flat top wagons had fruit boxes put on them with planks on them, and people, all in their good finery, ladies with white dresses, would sit on those seats and go the distance from Palmwoods up to Buderim.
Now, as a researcher, this would have to be one of the engineering feats of those days.
I think you're right there, yes. And the significant thing is that it was a private railway. Now, it's called a tramway because the only money available at the time from the government was a tramway loan. So when they applied for money, it was for a tramway. So although it's a light railway, they had to call it a tramway.
And it was only 2'6" in gauge?
2'6", yep. They would have favoured 3'6", the same as the standard Queensland line, but in country like this, with another foot, it would have been much more expensive because you'd have to have bigger curves, that sort of thing.
Now, tell me, we've just walked through a cutting, and you were telling me before about how they actually made the tramway through the cutting with gunpowder.
That's
just
right.
Explain that for me.
Yeah, it was some sort of explosive powder, and they would have to drill a hole down into the sandstone using a jumper bar, like a small crowbar, or else a big long chisel hit with a big hammer, and they'd make a hole down in the stone, maybe that depth, and then they'd pour the explosive powder down that, covered with sand and water, and light the fuse, go away and blast it up. And there are a few places in the walk where you can see half of the drilled hole where it has blasted itself off.
So it was a cut and fill exercise here on this cutaway to actually lay the line. So we've got culverts down the bottom. So how on earth did you find where the culverts were with this much soil above them?
Well, it was very hard, and we did find that the method of building the embankment, the first thing they did was they put the draining culvert pipe right down on the bottom of the ground, didn't have it elevated at all. And when we started looking for it, the outlet from the culvert pipe would be way down the slope there, and the inlet up here, with 80 or 100 years of timber falling on it and all the branches and bark, would be well and truly covered. So we couldn't find it. You there was no sign of where it was. So we'd go down the bottom, take a compass heading up the culvert pipe, and then mark the bottom where we were and come up back here on top of the embankment and put a reciprocal heading on the compass and find out exactly where we were, and then take that heading down there and would give us an idea where the culvert might be. And some of them would be down 3 metres.
Now, we walked down to the walking track where we are here, and we came from Talco Station. Now, my understanding is that the First Nations people had a real involvement in this as well.
Well, the only recorded involvement now is that sections of the line have Aboriginal language names. Sybil Vyse, the late Sybil Vyse, told us that her mother had said that Telco, the one you mentioned, was the gubby word for laughter or happiness, and that's why you see it spelled differently, sometimes with a C, sometimes with a K, sometimes with a G.
So there were Queenslanders, there were people from all sorts of places come to work on the rail, but I understand there were some Spaniards as well.
That's right. We find in the few records there are, because a lot of the records were lost unfortunately with a fire, and the few records indicate that there were Spaniards. And of course there were a lot of local people. It was just before the First World War, and a lot of the local people then went on to be involved with the war in Europe.
Well, the diggers would have obviously worked on the rail here.
That's right, yeah. Literally diggers.
Yeah. So in closing on this piece, how would they have actually, they wouldn't have had dozers or anything like that.
No
so,
machines.
So how did they do their excavating?
It was all done with picks and shovels. Yeah. And the movement of the soil and the stone was all horses and scoops that were dragged along. It was laborious. Took 3 years to build.
Right.
From 1911, and it opened in 1914.
So the real reason was because they were having trouble getting the produce backwards and forward, and the dirt roads were being cut up.
Yep.
It flourished when it was set up and opened,
Yep.
but apparently it declined in the last couple of years because there was other modes of transport.
That's right, yeah. The roads improved and the trucks improved, and so the tramway wasn't as useful as it was.
So the gear that was used, the engines, and I understand the whole line was just dismantled by gangs?
Yeah, and sold to Moreton Sugar Mill, and some went up to Bundaberg. The rails were used up there, and the engine that was still operating, the German Krauss engine, went up to Bingara Sugar Mill at Bundaberg and worked on for years and years. Yeah. It was re-gauged from 2'6" to 2 foot.
Yeah. And I noticed on the entry you've got with modern times you've got an electronic counter, so there'd be certainly a lot of people that would walk this track in a 12-month period.
I think so. The last figure I can recall council telling us was a bit over 2,000 in a month.
And the plans from here on for the future, for the tram, well, the easement that the tramway was?
Well, we would hope that it will be extended back to Buderim. It won't be like this tramway looking thing. It'll be verge tracks down roads, and then along a section that's still available, and then right through to where the old tramway station was, which was between the old post office and the swimming pool in Buderim. And then we would hope in more years to come that it will be extended across the main Bruce Highway and along significant private stretches that still exist over there, maybe right to Palmwoods, which would be great.
So there's obviously a really bright future for this, and there's plenty of time to come walk the trail.
Yeah, I reckon so. and many people enjoy the walk because you're quite close to Mons Road, but you never hear the traffic, and it's shaded. And because it was a tramway, you're not going up and down hills. It's more or less level all the way.
The Palmwoods railhead was always a hub and magnet for activity, being the central point for Montville, Buderim and Maroochydore. The community's need for a meeting place was quickly realised, with the first hall being erected on the current swimming pool land during 1911. With the population growth rate outstripping the facilities, a new hall was built on the current site on the 12th of May 1922. Much of the credit for funds raised was attributed to H.C. Livingston, and his memorial plaque can be seen today on the Main Street rock wall. The CWA Hall in Main Street, built in 1937, was a welcome rest point for travelling mothers and infants. Walter Scott Collins, owner of the grocery store, purchased a corner block from the Lands Department in 1923 and built a spacious residence which still overlooks the town today on the corner of Jane and Main Street. Palmwoods today has a strong, authentic historical value, with many of the original houses and commercial buildings heritage listed. Roger, it's been often said that Palmwoods has a real intrinsic historical value and authenticness about it being a railway town.
I think Palmwoods is really interesting because it's one of the original railway towns, but it hasn't undergone a lot of the changes that the other places. But Palmwoods was built on the spot and to a rather interesting topography. And it hasn't been changed greatly. A lot of the tourist town, for instance, suffer from inauthentic development coming in, maybe appealing to the popular idea of heritage. But I think that inauthenticity has made them Disney-esque, whereas Palmwoods is very original and very true to its original development.
Do you have a view on how, in moving Palmwoods forward, that the new developments can also coexist with the existing heritage developments?
You can have modern development in amongst older buildings. A good example is the glass pyramid at the Louvre. Nobody thinks that's a 18th century palace. But if they had have done something that sort of looked like it might have been from that era, that would have been wrong, and you would devalue everything. It's like going to a museum of old masters and you know one of them's a fake. It devalues all of them. So I think that authenticity is a real key, but it can happen in an environment where things change, where things are added and things remain vibrant and useful.
And some of the older buildings are being done up. For instance, the CWA Hall has had a recent refurb, as well as it would be good to see the retention of the heritage value for, say, the ES&A Bank building as well. Is there a way that they can keep, once again, with, let's say, the ES&A Bank, its authenticness as well moving forward?
Yes, well, I think using it for a commercial purpose, not necessarily a bank, but the old bank building and the house are well situated, and a new use could draw on their heritage significance. I think Palmwoods in general is very well located on the coast. It's very central in what's becoming a more and more intense tourism activity, and it has the capacity to be able to draw people there as a tourist focus, providing that the authenticity is maintained and the actual building fabric remains.
How do you think the local people at the time went about trying to work out where, say, commercial buildings were going to be placed as part of the moving forward of Palmwoods?
Palmwoods is quite unusual in that the topography has very much determined how things are arranged. I'm guessing that the railway station was the focal point for the early town, with the housing for railway staff located above the railway station so they could observe what was going on even when they were off duty, and the other functions have interwoven along that spine. So yes, interesting, and I think the early builders would have adapted to that situation. That the bank and the hotel are typical Main Street buildings. The churches unusually are set apart up on the hillside, so it is really quite a unique situation they've dealt with.
And I take it your focus really is on the commercial building side, but how does the build for the housing over the years, how does that married with the commercial side, the architectural side of the commercial buildings?
Well, the bank certainly is a good one to look at, because it was pretty unusual in the early days, or at any time, to build a timber bank. Banks tend to trade on their security, so obviously a stone or a brick building projects that. But I think in the case of Palmwoods, they used the rather elaborate manager's residence to project that status into the community. The Edwardian doors, for instance, would have been pretty unusual for that era of development.
I would think that it would be a testament to the design and construction of some of the existing heritage buildings now to have weathered the passage of time. Would you design that sort of a building now?
A complex question indeed. The early Queenslanders evolved in a number of ways for a number of reasons. Probably one of the key determinants was the availability of materials. Timber was abundant. It could adapt to sloping sites, but nobody can point to one reason why building on stumps was a good idea. But there are quite a range of reasons, even down to the fact that different species of mosquitoes only stay a certain distance from the ground. But probably the overriding one was termites, which would have been a new experience for people of that time. So by using termite-resistant timbers for stumps and then ant caps to force the termites into the open, they could then utilise the softer timbers, the pines, for instance, for the main constructions. The hardwoods were incredibly hard and difficult to work.
The increase of rail transport in and out, and in fact other modes of transport, would have affected to some degree the length of time that some of this housing and commercial infrastructure would have been put in place. Do you think that affected the design of some of those buildings in Palmwoods as well?
Well, once the railway arrived, it opened up a lot of new opportunities for materials. I mean, sawn timber could be imported. In fact, pre-cut houses could come via the railway. Prior to the railway, it was horse-drawn or pulled by cattle or river transport. So there was a huge opportunity to bring in new materials, but the basic formula for how they built, I think, remained fairly unchanged. Today, it's a different set of circumstances. I think the timber houses were pretty cold in winter.
If we were going to try and keep the authentic heritage value of Palmwoods for the future, what would be the first thing that we've got to do in moving forward from the commercial building side?
First thing is identification, what makes the place significant. Then you can move forward in a way that doesn't impact on that significance. So there's nothing wrong with bringing in new buildings that are subservient to the significant buildings, but probably one of the important things is to leave a clear trail so that people in the future can understand what's part of the historic fabric and what's been introduced later.
Do you think the commercial development ethos at the moment is in line with that sort of thinking?
I think if it's done carefully, you can have your cake and eat it too. I think it's really important to understand the fabric that exists there and then to work with it. And usually there's a plan A and a plan B. Often people don't even consider the plan B, but it's obviously, or can be, the most effective way forward. The hotel in Palmwoods is a good example where its particular character is a draw card, and I'm sure the proprietors understand that yes, you can make changes to keep it useful and viable, but the external expression is something that their customers relate to.
After several failed attempts by prospective licensees, the original Palmwoods Hotel was constructed of ironbark carted by Donald Coghill's Bullock team to the site. The doors opened May 1912 with James Jap Matheson, licensee at the helm. The hotel not only catered for thirsty sightseers and locals, it provided a closed-in feed room, stables, and a cattle sale yard where the first clearing sale was held, attended by a large, well-fed and well-watered crowd. Following the death of James in 1914, the lease moved through several families until Castlemaine Brewery Quinlan Gray & Co. took over the lease in 1918 for a 7-year term. As with many historic Australian hotels, the Palmwoods Hotel has had many licensees. Each change has been implemented with careful thought given to retaining the hotel's heritage value while providing day trippers and locals the opportunity to enjoy the ambience and culture the hotel brings. Another prominent feature in the Margaret Street landscape is Rick's Garage, originally operated by Harry Medder around 1925. Like the Palmwoods Hotel, over the years the site has been owned and operated by various families. In more recent times, the Jamieson family operate the site to the delight of locals and many visiting customers, arriving on motorbikes, vintage and modern-day cars of all shapes and sizes. Now, we've looked at what was happening here in Palmwoods in the early years prior to and after European settlement from 1885 with regard to buildings, tramways, hotels, farms and sawmills. Now, things were moving forward with speed, but in other parts of the world, things were not so rosy. Australia, in particular Palmwoods, was dragged into these destructive world events. The RSL sub-branch was established in 1920 with the current RSL charter awarded in 1939, but not without some controversy. Many of our early Palmwoods residents fought in the First and Second World Wars. Many returned home to continue their life in Palmwoods, but far more than should have lost their lives defending our freedom and Australian values. A magnificent lead light, unveiled on the 100th Remembrance Day anniversary, forms part of the Palmwoods Memorial Hall's southern wall overlooking the new Pickabeen Square landscaping. The lead light embodies the town's pledge to preserve the local Anzac legacy. A tribute to the Flanders Field event features in the lead light. The War Memorial and Archway on the corner of Margaret and Main commemorates our diggers' involvement in war. Now, Palmwoods digger Cedric Popkin worked as a carpenter in Palmwoods and enlisted in 1916. Following considerable debate since the war years, Cedric has been accredited with bringing about the demise of Manfred von Richthofen, famously known as the Red Baron. Here's the real story.
The real story, evidence post-mortem of the downed Red Baron shows that a bullet came from the ground, a number of bullets came from the ground, from the trench line occupied by the Australian troops. Cedric Popkin was the sergeant in charge of those troops. The previous sergeant was missing in action, so he was made up in the trenches. So the troops made a special effort to have a go at this guy. Now, the Red Baron was pursuing one British pilot, and another British pilot was pursuing the Red Baron. So you had 3 aircraft travelling together, and it was no mean feat shooting the right aircraft down. So there would have been some friendly fire, I would say, at the time. But that's the long and short story. Now, there was conjecture over the years that a pilot downed him, but again, wrong calibre and wrong direction. So the bullet entered through the Red Baron's lower right-hand side, up through his heart and out through the top left side. There was also one bullet went through his chin, out the top, and a few went into his legs. So there is no question in anyone's mind these days. So he lived and worked here, and his family was here. So he was a true Palmwoods boy. But the main enlistment drive was in Brisbane. That's where the ships left from. So it was all done in the one day, on the ship, gone, see you later, sunshine. And now that that's all settled, he's our Palmwoods boy. He belongs to us. He enlisted basically as a Palmwoods citizen. So at our last annual general meeting of the RSL sub-branch, we said together, let's do something for Cedric. Let's put together some sort of memorial. And it was unanimous. So the sub-branch has now applied for funding to put a memorial of some sort in place. And we've just been waiting for that wall to be completed, put our signage back up, and then set about the planning process for that. Our records, namely our charter document, the master document, was lost in the 1974 floods. They were all stored in Brisbane at South East Queensland District headquarters. That all went underwater, metres of water. So every record from every sub-branch in the state was gone, basically. And people then, over the years, the last at least 10 years that I've been on the committee, they've said, oh no, the records are lost, we're done for. We can't prove when our sub-branch came into being. Well, I sat down in front of the National Library of Australia website. Within 10 minutes, I had the definitive document, a newspaper clipping from the 14th of May, 1920, where the first meeting of the RSS AILA took place, presided over by 2 men of the clergy. Story done. There's the document, unequivocally. I then applied to SCD, South East Queensland District Secretary. She said, no problem, Tony. I furnished the evidence to her. Within a few weeks, we had a brand new charter document framed. Done. Again, conjecture over.
So we've arrived in the 21st century, and it's now 2021. Present development will provide housing in a number of key sites for families keen to be part of this comfortable lifestyle. To complement the housing expansion, new businesses keen to service the local residents will also be provided opportunities to be part of the Palmwoods growth path. Development and conservation do have competing interests, but they can work together to the region's benefit. The Palmwoods Business Centre, while small compared to other shopping precincts on the coast, does have an ideal business mix to cater for the community's real character, individual needs and laid-back lifestyle. Businesses have a voice through the Palmwoods Community and Business Association.
Well, the Palmwoods Community and Business Association started off many years ago, I think just after First World War or around that time, as the Palmwoods Progress Association. And obviously they formed a group to make progress. Around 2015 we changed the name to the Palmwoods Community and Business Association. We've got the same aim though. We like to grow the town, help the businesses, provide community events and bring everybody together. Well, we're only a very small organisation. I would say there's not many more than about 7 or 8 businesses, but there's not many community members either. We're always looking for new businesses and we're always looking for new community members that can help lift this town on social occasions or business occasions. So I think we've about 35 members, but not all are active and not all are volunteers. But they do provide us support when they can. We're a spokesperson for the town along with others, but we interact with the local politicians, both state, federal and our local councillors to raise issues and to add praise when we need to add praise, like the picker being green. That's fantastic. Councillor Jenny Mackay drove that and it's been beneficial for the town. But there again, the businesses on Little Main Street suffered for many, many months while that was going under construction, but they're all thriving now. And it's a beautiful, beautiful area in front of the Memorial Hall. The state government declared Palmwoods Then and Now a urban corridor, which virtually ties the council hands. They can't do too much. There's over 500 new approved lots in town. That's a lot of new cars that can't park in town, that can't bring their money into town. Margaret Street is a state government road. We need more work on Margaret Street to slow it down and provide more parking. It's a balance. A lot of people don't like all this new development in town, and that's understandable from some people's perspective. They like a beautiful, old, quiet town, but it's here. We've got to learn to live with it. We've got to learn to manage it. We've got to learn to get the benefits for not only for the businesses, but for the whole community. The community side, we run events, but COVID-wise, we've come to a full stop. We used to do the bush dance, or we still do the bush dance when we can, either at the school or in the Memorial Hall. We've had jazz on the green. We've helped considerably with Time Warp, and we run anything we can to bring the community together in a social setting. We've had movie nights on the green, but we've slightly outgrown that now. Anything we can do to bring the community together, get the kids out, get the picnic blankets out, will be there. When they redeveloped Piccadilly Green, it vastly affected the businesses on Little Main Street. They all struggled through. Council did what they could to help them, but in the end, I think it was worth it, without a doubt. The businesses did struggle. Some closed, some had to move on, some got higher rents because it was a more pleasant area to do business. But overall, I think it was well worth it. I think the businesses appreciate the beautiful landscaping there and the beautiful setting. If I had that magic wand, I would have waved it a long time ago, but I think that would lead us to some off-site car parking, would lead us to the redevelopment of the State Road, Margaret Street, to slow the traffic down a little bit, maybe drop it down to 40, and to put a pedestrian crossing in and to beautify it up to make the town just such a better looking place. But yeah, we believe that Palmwoods is more than Palmwoods. It's 4555, it is Hunchy, it is Landshut. But yeah, we like to encompass all the areas, partly because they're a little bit smaller than us, and partly because we can come together.
Palmwoods is Division 5 under the Sunshine Coast Council. Our local councillor is Winston Johnson. His portfolio includes customer service, local laws, administration, waste and development assessment. Winston is keen to move Palmwoods infrastructure forward in line with proposed master plans.
These master plans take quite a number of years to actually come to fruition, but gradually they're starting to take place. There's a major upgrade of the Palmwoods swimming pool coming up in the next few years. There's most likely next year a shade sail going over the skate park. And also at the present moment there's a new AFL cricket club clubhouse that's being built in Jubilee Drive. And there's a number of other things that will over the coming years happen, and it all takes money and time. A new clubhouse for the cricket and AFL is a state-funded COVID-19 project, but a lot of the others that are going to be happening in the next few years are actually council-funded. But we're always on the lookout for state and federal money. Pines development is currently being built. I had to intercede to ensure that there weren't too high a ratio of multiple dwellings in that development. Going back towards Woombye, that in that corridor through from Nambour right through to Palmwoods, it's designated for urban planning or urban development in the SEQ State Planning Act. And you know, although it's very sad to see some of the trees in the environmental areas being disturbed and changed, unfortunately there's not a lot we can do about some of that, but we're trying wherever possible to retain as much vegetation cover as possible. There's also the retirement over 50s village, which is being built over near the school, Palmer School. Sunshine Coast Council has for a number of years now, purchased a lot of land and continues to purchase land for environmental purposes. And the reason for that is to protect sensitive environmental areas, but also the other reason is that, you know, when we're losing some tree cover in certain areas, we can replace it in other areas, so that by 2041 there'll be at least the same number of, or same amount of tree cover, natural tree cover, not weeds, right? Natural tree cover as there currently is. Our main focus at the present moment is Kalora Park. There's been a lot happen there of recent times, and I thank Gail Lockyer and the concerned community who came together a few weeks ago, and it's given our council officers very much an understanding of what the community expects. So I'm not just belting my head against a brick wall, they're hearing it directly from the people, and quite a lot has been done. The problem with that particular park is that it's part owned by Queensland Rail, part owned by Department of Natural Resources, and council basically owns a very small amount of it too. We're currently about to commence on a sedimentary control area to the east of Kalora Park, and that's going to stop a lot of the sediment that currently is coming down into the ponded area into Kalora Park. So, you know, there's a lot of things that are happening in Palmwoods. You know, previous councillor, Councillor Jenny, managed to convince council to build this beautiful placemaking area here, Pickabeen, and you know, this is the sort of thing that we're wanting to do with a lot of our towns west of the Bruce Highway. There's plans to get the state government on board, because from the railway line through to the school is a state corridor, and Margaret Street, which goes from the railway line up through to the school, the section where the business community are, we're trying to get the state to come on board to fund and give us approval to actually provide slower traffic movement, better pedestrian access and crossings. One of the major things is that people don't want us to import the small allotment sizes that are east of the Bruce Highway, you know, the 300 and 250 square metre blocks with houses jammed in. That's one of the things that won't be happening west of the Bruce Highway. We're going to retain the minimum allotment size of about 800 square metres. In addition to that, there's some concerns about the high number of multiple dwellings, duplex and triplexes, and that's one of the problems. But the problem that comes with that is because of council's town plan, which allows much narrower streets, we finish up with a situation where there's all these cars parked in the street because they can't be parked on site. So we can't do much about the existing situations, but in the future we will be making sure that when the new town plan comes in, we're making sure that there's adequate parking in the streets, so that when transport vehicles, the rubbish trucks, removalists, all those sort of people and builders are wanting to access the street, they can actually get through without a problem with too many cars parked in the street or on the footpaths. The only thing that's really holding it back, and has held it back for a number of years now, has been the what's happening with the railway. You know, what's happening with the railway overpasses or underpasses. The intersection of Woombye Road, Margaret Street, Chevelham Road, Jubilee Drive is a real bottleneck there, and they all have to pass in underneath the rail bridge or the rail overpass. So, you know, until we can get clear timetables and clear ideas from Queensland Rail and Transport and Main Roads about how they're going to deal with all of these issues, and they're being very cagey at the present moment, we can't, it's holding Palmwoods back, because, you know, my understanding is that hopefully when they do upgrade the rail, if they shift it slightly, that what we will finish up with is an area where we can put a lot more parking for the business community of Palmwoods. We've got other things happening, like for instance, we recently approved the supermarket complex between Hill Street and Church Street. That's a major project for Palmwoods. Hopefully it'll go ahead because Palmwoods needs a larger supermarket. And at the present moment, that's probably the only available site that under the town plan, although it's not necessarily an ideal site for a supermarket because of its slope and because of access, etc., etc. So they're the sort of things that we're working on. And if we can just find out from Queensland Rail and Transport and Main Roads what their plans are for the future, then we can move a lot of the stuff forward. We've now got a state member for this area who's a member of the government in Rob Skelton, and I think that Rob is rapidly becoming aware of a lot of these issues and the need for the state to be more involved and spend more money on infrastructure.
So that's the Palmwoods story, not the full story, as there's so much to see and experience in Palmwoods. We've reviewed the past and the steps taken to make Palmwoods what it is today, and we've also caught a glimpse of the future. Palmwoods has retained its laid-back lifestyle and its authenticity we can enjoy for many years to come. Take some time to visit Palmwoods, walk the streets, chat to the friendly locals. You will find just how much Palmwoods has to offer. I trust one day we'll see you in Palmwoods.